In 1943, three men broke out of a prisoner of war camp in Kenya. They climbed a 17,000-foot mountain. Then they broke back into the same prison and surrendered themselves to the guards. This is not fiction. This actually happened. And the reason why might be the most fascinating part of the entire story. If you've ever felt trapped, if you've ever needed an escape so badly that you'd risk everything just to feel alive again, this story is for you. In the next 30 minutes, I'm taking you inside one of the most unusual escapes in World War II history. You'll discover how three Italian prisoners planned a mountain expedition with nothing but prison scraps and a beef tin label, how they survived 18 days in one of Africa's most dangerous environments completely unarmed, and why the British camp commandant reduced their punishment because he was so impressed by what they'd accomplished. This isn't just a story about climbing a mountain. It's about what the human spirit will do when faced with the slow death of monotony and purposelessness. Hit that like button if you're ready for one of the most incredible true stories you've never heard. Let's begin. Our story starts in Kenya, 1941. The British and Allied forces have just liberated East Africa from Italian occupation. Thousands of Italian soldiers and colonial service personnel have been captured and sent to prisoner of war camps scattered across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanganyika. One of these camps is Camp 354, located in Nanyuki, about 120 miles north of Nairobi. And this camp has something special. Something that sets it apart from every other POW camp in East Africa. From the barbed wire fences, the prisoners can see Mount Kenya, all 17,000 feet of it. Rising from the equatorial plateau like a frozen throne, its twin peaks, Batian and Nelion, covered in glaciers and snow. Every single day, the prisoners can look up and see that mountain. Beautiful, majestic, free, and utterly unreachable. Among the prisoners is a man named Felice Benuzzi. He's 32 years old. Before the war, he was an international competitive swimmer who represented Italy from 1933 to 1935. He studied law at Rome University, speaks multiple languages, and joined the Italian colonial service in 1938. When the Allies liberated Abyssinia, modern-day Ethiopia, in 1941, he was captured and sent to Camp 354, and now he's rotting. That's the word he uses, rotting. Here's what Benuzzi wrote about life in the camp. People in prison camps do not live. They only vegetate. Day after day, the same routine. Wake up, roll call, eat meager rations, stare at the fence, sleep, wake up and do it all over again. No purpose, no challenge, no life, just existence, just vegetating. The psychological toll is crushing. Depression settles in, hope drains away. Men lose themselves to the monotony. But every day, Benuzzi sees that mountain, and an idea starts to form. A crazy, impossible, completely mad idea. What if he could climb it? What if he could break out of this camp, not to escape to freedom, not to return to Italy, but simply to climb that mountain? To do something difficult, something meaningful, something that would make him feel alive again. He approaches a fellow prisoner, a professional mountaineer, and pitches the idea. The man's response? "You're insane. To climb Mount Kenya, you'd need 6 months of training, first-class food, proper equipment, and porters to carry everything. You have none of that. You're a prisoner. It's impossible." But Benuzzi is not to be put off. If the professional won't go, he'll find someone who will. He recruits 2 fellow prisoners, Dr. Giovanni Balletto, called Juan by his friends, from Geneva, a physician with a sharp mind and a hunger for adventure, and Vincenzo Barsotti, called Enzo, a sailor from Lido di Camaiore. 3 men. 0 mountaineering experience between them, except for Benuzzi's general fitness from his swimming days. 0 proper equipment. zero realistic chance of success. And they're going to attempt one of Africa's most challenging peaks, the second highest mountain on the continent after Kilimanjaro. Drop a comment right now and tell me if you think they're brave or completely insane. I want to know what you're thinking. Let me give you some context about what they're actually proposing to climb. Mount Kenya is not just tall, it's dangerous. The mountain rises to 17,058 feet at Batian Peak. For comparison, that's nearly as high as Denali's base camp in Alaska. Mount Kenya is the second highest mountain in Africa, surpassed only by Kilimanjaro, which stands at 19,341 feet. But don't let that second-place ranking fool you. Mount Kenya is technically far more challenging than Kilimanjaro. Where Kilimanjaro is essentially a very difficult hike, Mount Kenya requires actual technical climbing skills, rope work, ice climbing, rock climbing, the kind of mountaineering that can kill you if you make a mistake. The mountain sits almost exactly on the equator, which creates bizarre weather patterns. Think about that for a second. The equator, where it's supposed to be hot and tropical. And yet the summit is covered in glaciers and permanent snow. The temperature differential is extreme. At the base, you're in tropical heat. At the summit, you're in sub-zero conditions. Your body goes through this incredible transition as you climb, from sweating in the jungle to freezing on ice fields. Glaciers and snow at the summit, tropical conditions at the base. It's like climbing through multiple continents in a single journey. The approach goes through multiple vegetation zones, each with its own challenges. First, open grassland at the base plateau, where the elevation is up to around 6,000 feet. This is relatively easy terrain, but the heat is oppressive. Then you enter dense forest with cedar and yellowwood from 6,000 to 10,000 feet. The forest is so thick in places you can barely see 10 feet ahead. The humidity is crushing. Every surface is wet. The ground is muddy and treacherous. And this is where the really dangerous animals live, which we'll get to in a moment. From 8,000 to 10,000 feet, bamboo dominates the upper forest zone. Bamboo forests are disorienting. The stalks all look the same. It's easy to get lost. The paths are narrow and overgrown. Then you break out into giant heather zones, where the vegetation becomes stunted and alien-looking. Then high moorland with Afro-alpine vegetation at 11,000 to 12,000 feet. This is where you really start to feel the altitude. The air gets noticeably thinner. Every step requires more effort. Then moss and lichen zones, where almost nothing grows except these primitive organisms clinging to rock. And finally, above 15,000 feet, bare rock, ice, glaciers, and snow. No vegetation at all, just stone and ice and the brutal reality of high-altitude mountaineering. And the wildlife. Oh, the wildlife! This is where it gets absolutely terrifying. The lower slopes are infested with big game. And I don't mean deer and rabbits, I mean elephants. African bush elephants that can weigh 6 tons and will absolutely charge if they feel threatened. Buffalo, and not the docile American bison. African buffalo, Cape buffalo. These are considered one of the most dangerous animals on the entire continent. They're unpredictable, they're aggressive, they've killed more hunters than lions. A buffalo can gore you with those massive horns and then trample what's left. Black rhinoceros. Nearly extinct now, but back in the 1940s, they were more common on Mount Kenya's slopes. A rhino has terrible eyesight, but an incredible sense of smell, and if it catches your scent and feels threatened, it will charge. 2 tons of armored fury running at 30 miles per hour. You cannot outrun it. You cannot fight it. If it decides to kill you, you're dead. Leopards. They hunt at night. They're ambush predators. They can climb trees better than you can walk, and they see you long before you see them. the endangered Sunni buck, albino zebra. Smaller animals, but indicators of how wild this environment is. This is not a hiking trail with safety rails and park rangers. This is not a national park with designated campsites and emergency rescue. This is raw African wilderness, 1940s wilderness, before modern conservation, before tourism infrastructure. And our 3 prisoners will be walking through it completely unarmed. No guns, no knives beyond basic tools, nothing. If an elephant decides to charge, they have nothing. If a buffalo attacks, they're done. They have to rely entirely on stealth, luck, and the hope that they don't stumble into a situation they can't walk away from. The mountain was first summited by British geographer Halford John Mackinder in 1899 with the help of 2 Swiss guides, César Ollier and Joseph Brocherel. These were professional alpine guides, men who'd climbed in the European Alps their entire lives, men who knew mountains the way sailors know the sea, and even with proper equipment, professional expertise, and local porter support, it took them multiple attempts, multiple expeditions. They failed several times before they finally reached the summit. Before Mackinder, other experienced explorers had tried and failed. Hungarian explorer Samuel Grof Teleki attempted it in 1887 and had to turn back. British geologist John Walter Gregory tried in 1893 and also failed to reach the summit. This mountain breaks experienced climbers with proper gear, and Benuzzi, Balletto, and Barsotti are proposing to attempt it with homemade equipment and no experience. The Kikuyu people who live on the mountain's fertile lower slopes call it Kirinyaga or Kerenyaga, meaning mountain of whiteness. They consider it sacred, the home of their omnipotent deity Ngai. The mountain is not just a geographic feature to them, it's a spiritual presence, the dwelling place of God. They believe their ancestors came from this mountain, that it's the center of their world. And in a way, it is. The volcanic soil on the lower slopes is incredibly fertile. The Kikuyu, along with related peoples like the Embu and Meru, have cultivated these slopes for centuries. They know the mountain, they respect the mountain, they fear the mountain, and here are 3 Italian prisoners, foreigners, outsiders, proposing to climb their sacred mountain with nothing but courage and improvised gear. So this is what Benuzzi, Balletto, and Barsotti are proposing to climb. With improvised equipment, with meager rations saved from prison meals, and with only one map. Want to know what their map was? Here's where it gets absolutely wild. Their only map of Mount Kenya was the label from an OXO beef tin. An OXO tin. You know, the bouillon cubes, the beef stock cubes your grandmother used to make soup. The tin had a sketch of the mountain on the label showing the peaks and some information about the south face. That was it. That was their entire navigation system. Not a topographic map, not a surveyor's chart, not even a hand-drawn map from someone who'd climbed it. A commercial product label, a piece of marketing material from a food company. Imagine deciding to climb one of Africa's most dangerous mountains using the picture on a soup cube tin as your guide. It's like trying to navigate the Pacific Ocean using a postcard. The level of absurdity is off the charts. And yet they decided to go for it anyway. Why? Because the alternative was to keep vegetating, to let their spirits die slowly behind barbed wire, to wake up every day with no purpose, no challenge, no reason to push themselves. Benuzzi later wrote that the view of Mount Kenya from the camp provided inspiration, a goal, a reason to keep living. Every morning he'd wake up and see those peaks, and every morning the mountain was calling him. Not literally, but psychologically. The mountain represented everything he'd lost: freedom, challenge, purpose, life itself. As long as the mountain was there was hope. There was something to strive toward, a goal that made sense of the senseless tedium of camp life, so they started planning. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was months of careful, secret preparation. In secret, they began hoarding materials. And let me tell you, this required incredible patience and stealth. Prison camps are designed to prevent exactly this kind of thing. Guards watch. Other prisoners might inform to gain favor. Every possession is monitored. But Benuzzi and his co-conspirators were methodical. Scraps of metal from repairs around the camp, bits of rope that might be lying around, canvas from old tents or sacks, anything they could surreptitiously gather without drawing attention. A piece here, a piece there, never enough to be missed, never in a pattern that would raise suspicion. Over weeks and months, they accumulated what they needed. They saved portions of their already meager prison rations, hiding food for the journey. This might be the hardest part to imagine. These men were already getting barely enough food to survive. Prison rations in a World War II POW camp were not generous. You were hungry all the time, and yet they took food from their own mouths and hid it, dried it, preserved it, built up a supply for the climb. Every meal they'd pocket a bit of bread, save a portion of whatever protein they got, hide it somewhere the guards wouldn't find it. Imagine the discipline that requires. You're hungry right now, but you eat less so that future you can attempt something that might kill you anyway. That's not just determination. That's a level of commitment that most of us will never have to summon. They studied the mountain from the camp, memorizing the routes they could see. This was their real preparation. Every day they'd observe the mountain, track how the light changed on different faces, watch weather patterns, try to understand which routes might be possible. The northwest face was visible from camp. They could see ridges, couloirs, potential climbing routes. They'd discuss it quietly among themselves. That ridge looks climbable. That face is too steep. We'd need to approach from this angle. Without ever setting foot on the mountain, they were planning their route, like chess players studying a board before a match. Except the board was a 17,000-foot mountain, and one wrong move meant death. They created makeshift climbing equipment, crampons fashioned from scrap metal. Think about what crampons are: metal spikes that attach to your boots to give you traction on ice and snow. Modern crampons are precisely engineered pieces of equipment. They have to be strong enough to support your full body weight on a single point. They have to be sharp enough to bite into hard ice. They have to be light enough to carry and durable enough to survive the abuse of climbing. Benuzzi and his friends made these from scrap metal in a prison camp. They bent metal strips, sharpened points, created bindings to attach them to their boots, and they did it all in secret, hoping the guards wouldn't notice. When French climber Roland Truffaut found these homemade crampons 9 years later in 1952, he was so impressed that he donated them to a mountaineering museum. They're still there today, physical proof of what desperation and ingenuity can create. A crude ice axe. Again, imagine fashioning a climbing tool from prison camp scraps. An ice axe has to function as a walking stick on snow, a climbing tool on steep ice, and potentially a life-saving self-arrest device if you start to slide. It has to be strong, it has to be balanced, and they made one from bits and pieces they found lying around a POW camp. Improvised backpacks to carry their meager supplies. Everything was improvised. Nothing was proper. Everything was a gamble. And they knew it. But they did it anyway. The planning took months. And finally, in January 1943, they were ready. On the evening of January 24th, 1943, 3 Italian prisoners slipped out of Camp 354 undetected. They simply walked out. The British guards didn't notice, and just like that, they were free. Sort of. Because immediately things started going wrong. Barsotti, the sailor, fell ill almost instantly after the breakout. He was already weak from prison rations, and the stress of the escape made it worse. But he refused to turn back. He'd come this far. They all had. So the three men pushed forward into the night, heading toward the mountain they'd stared at for so long. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I've got more incredible true stories coming that you won't want to miss. Trust me on this one. The first challenge was the lower slopes, dense jungle and forest. And remember, they're unarmed, completely defenseless. The first night they hear elephants. The sound of something massive moving through the undergrowth, snapping branches like twigs. They freeze, hold their breath. The elephant passes. Later, they spot buffalo in the distance. African buffalo are considered one of the most dangerous animals on the continent. Unpredictable, aggressive. A charging buffalo can kill a lion, and our three prisoners have nothing but makeshift walking sticks. They give the buffalo a wide berth and keep moving. The encounters with wildlife became some of the most exciting passages in Benuzzi's later memoir, Leopards in the Trees. The constant awareness that they're prey in this environment. Every sound could be a threat. Every shadow could be death, but they keep climbing. Through the forest zone, through the bamboo. The altitude starts to affect them. Breathing becomes harder. Barsotti is struggling badly. His illness hasn't improved, but they push on. After several days of climbing, they reach the Hausberg Valley at the foot of the highest peaks. This becomes their base camp, and here they make a critical decision. Barsotti is too ill to continue to the summit. He'll stay at base camp. Benuzzi and Balletto will make the summit push alone. It's a tough call. They've come this far together. But attempting the technical climbing while sick could get Barsotti killed. Or worse, get all three of them killed. So Enzo stays behind, and Felice and Juan begin their assault on the summit. The route they choose is the Northwest Ridge. It's technical. It requires actual climbing, not just hiking. And remember, they're doing this with improvised equipment. Homemade crampons strapped to their feet, a crude ice axe in hand, the OXO tin label in a pocket. They climb for days. The altitude is brutal. Above 15,000 feet, every step is an effort. Their lungs burn, their muscles scream. The cold bites through their inadequate clothing. At night, they huddle together for warmth, burning their meager fuel supplies to boil water. They're exhausted, they're starving, and they're completely alone on one of Africa's most dangerous mountains. But they keep climbing. Finally, they reach a high point on Petit Gendarme, part of the Northwest Ridge, at approximately 16,400 feet. From here, they can see the true summit of Batian at 17,058 feet. It's close, so close they can almost touch it. But they can't make it. They don't have the equipment, they don't have the strength, and they're running out of time and supplies, so they make another difficult decision. They'll go as high as they can safely reach. They push to Point Lanana, the third highest peak at 16,355 feet. And here they plant a flag. They leave a message in a bottle, a record of their achievement, proof that they made it. Then they turn around and begin the long descent. The way back is as hazardous as the ascent. Maybe more so because now they're utterly depleted. Their food is gone. Their strength is nearly gone. They collect Barsotti from base camp. All three men are in rough shape. And now they have to get back through that wildlife gauntlet, back through the forest infested with elephants and buffalo and leopards, back through terrain that was dangerous when they were fresh and is potentially lethal now that they're exhausted. But they make it. Step by painful step, they make it. 18 days after they escaped Camp 354 on February 10, 1943, 3 Italian prisoners approach the gates of the camp. And they don't sneak back in. They walk right up to the entrance and give themselves up to the British commandant. The commandant is astonished. Prisoners don't break out and then break back in. That's not how this works. What were you doing? Where did you go? And Banuzi tells him, we climbed Mount Kenya. We escaped to climb the mountain, and now we're back. The commandant doesn't quite know what to do with this. On one hand, they escaped. That's a clear violation. That's punishable. The standard punishment for escape attempts is 28 days in solitary confinement. But on the other hand, they came back voluntarily. They didn't try to escape to freedom. They just wanted to climb a mountain. And they succeeded against impossible odds with nothing but courage and improvised equipment. The commandant makes a decision. He sentences all 3 men to 28 days in solitary confinement, and then he immediately commutes the sentence to 7 days. 7 days, down from 28. The reason he gives? In acknowledgement of their sporting effort. Sporting effort. The British commandant respects what they accomplished. He recognizes the courage, the determination, the sheer audacity of the achievement. So he reduces the punishment. 7 days in solitary, a slap on the wrist, and a nod of respect. I've linked some incredible resources about Mount Kenya and World War II POW camps in the description below. Check them out after you finish this video. And if you think this story deserves to be shared, hit that share button and send it to someone who needs to hear it. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. Because Felice Banuzi is not just a climber, he's a writer. And over the next 3 years, while still in POW camps, he writes a book about the experience. He writes it simultaneously in both English and Italian. He writes it on whatever paper he can find. He pours the whole story onto the page. The planning, the escape, the wildlife, the climb, the return, everything. In 1947, the Italian version is published by L'Eroica in Milano under the title Fuga sul Kenya. In 1952, the English version is published by William Kimber in London under the title No Picnic on Mount Kenya. The title comes from mountaineer Vivienne de Watteville's 1935 book Speak to the Earth, where she wrote, "No expedition on the mountain was ever a picnic. It's ironic. It's perfect. Because this definitely was not a picnic." The book becomes a mountaineering classic. It gets translated into French in 1950, German in 1953, Swedish, multiple editions in English alone, at least 18 impressions published over the decades. A concise version is included in a school literature series in 1960. New editions come out in 1974, 1989, 1999, and 2015. The 2015 McLuhan's Press edition includes 20 of Banuzi's watercolors in color, photographs of Nanyuki POW camp, and the full translation of the Italian appendix. Rick Ridgway, who wrote the introduction to the 1989 edition, said this: "This contrast of the freedom of the mountains against the oppression of man is the leitmotif of Banuzi's book. Perhaps more than any climbing story, No Picnic on Mount Kenya captures that strong underpinning of revolt common to most mountaineers. The men and women I know drawn to the hills are mavericks whose principal loyalty is to the individual's right to take his own risks and discover his own truths, and as much as anyone, Banuzi applauds that right and condemns those who might curtail it." The story gets adapted for television in 1953 on Robert Montgomery Presents, with George Chandler starring. In 1994, it becomes a feature film called The Ascent, written by David Wiltz and directed by Donald Shabib. It's a niche film, not widely known outside mountaineering circles, but it exists. The story has legs. In 1952, a French climber named Roland Truffaut led an expedition to Mount Kenya. At Hausberg Coal, they discovered the homemade crampons and equipment that Benuzzi and Balletto had left behind 9 years earlier. Still there, still intact. Truffaut retrieved the equipment and later donated it to the Musée de la Montagne in Chamonix, France, with Benuzzi's permission. Physical proof. Artifacts of an impossible journey. You can go see them today if you visit the museum. And remember that flag and message bottle they left at Point Lenana? English climbers later retrieved them and returned them to Benuzzi. He donated them to the Museo della Montagna in Torino, Italy. More artifacts, more proof. And Benuzzi himself? After the war, he joined the Italian diplomatic service in 1948. He served as Italian ambassador to France and later to the UNESCO office in Paris. He had a distinguished diplomatic career spanning decades. He died in Rome in July 1988 at the age of 77, and the mountain remembered him. A col, a mountain pass, between Point Dutton and Petit Gendarme on Mount Kenya was officially named Benuzzi Col in his honor. The mountain he climbed as a prisoner now bears his name forever. Dr. Giovanni Balletto and Vincenzo Barsotti returned to Italy after the war. Less is known about their later lives, but they remained friends with Benuzzi. The 1974 English edition of the book includes a photograph from the 1970s showing all three men together, decades after their adventure. So why does this story matter? Why am I telling you about 3 Italian prisoners climbing a mountain 82 years ago? Because this story is about something deeper than mountaineering. It's about what happens to the human spirit when it's trapped, when it's forced into monotony and purposelessness, when it starts to vegetate. Benuzzi and his friends were physically safe in Camp 354. The British treated them reasonably well. They weren't being tortured. They had food, shelter, medical care. They were surviving. But surviving isn't living. And that's what Benuzzi understood. He understood that the human spirit needs challenge, needs purpose, needs something difficult to strive toward. Without that, we don't really live. We just vegetate. We exist, but we don't thrive. So they risked everything. Not to escape the war, not to get home, but to feel alive, to test themselves against something real, to accomplish something difficult and meaningful. And here's the beautiful part. The British commandant understood that too. He could have thrown the book at them 28 days in solitary, maybe more, but instead he recognized the courage and spirit behind what they'd done. He saw 3 men who refused to let their souls die in captivity, and he honored that. 7 days, a sporting effort, in the middle of a brutal global war, in a prisoner of war camp, a moment of mutual respect between enemies, recognition that some things transcend politics and conflict, the human need for purpose, the drive to test oneself, the refusal to merely vegetate. This story has found new life in the internet age. A Reddit Today I Learned post about it drew massive interest. Comment sections filled with people saying, "I can't believe this is real. This is the most incredible story I've never heard." And they're right. This is one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories that seems too perfect to be real. But it is real. Every detail. The OXO tin map, the homemade crampons, the wildlife encounters, the voluntary return, the reduced sentence, the book, the artifacts in museums, the mountain pass named in Benuzzi's honor. All of it happened exactly as I've told you. Let's recap what you now know. In January 1943, 3 Italian prisoners of war, Felice Benuzzi, Giovanni Balletto, and Vincenzo Barsotti, escaped from Camp 354 in Nanyuki, Kenya. They climbed Mount Kenya, reaching approximately 16,400 feet, using only improvised equipment and an OXO beef tin label as their map. After 18 days, they voluntarily returned to the camp and surrendered. Their punishment was reduced from 28 days to 7 days in recognition of their achievement. WWII wrote a book about the experience that became a mountaineering classic. The homemade equipment they left on the mountain is now in museums. A mountain pass on Mount Kenya bears WWII's name, and the story continues to inspire people more than 80 years later. Here's what I want you to take from this. When you feel trapped, when you feel like you're just going through the motions, when you feel like you're vegetating instead of living, remember these 3 men. Remember that they didn't have freedom, resources, or proper equipment, but they refused to let their spirits die. They found a mountain to climb. Maybe literally, maybe metaphorically, they found something difficult and meaningful to strive toward, and it saved them. Not physically. They were already physically safe. It saved them psychologically and spiritually. It gave them purpose. It made them feel alive. So find your mountain. Find the thing that challenges you, the thing that scares you a little, the thing that makes you feel alive, and climb it. Not because it's practical, not because it makes sense, but because your spirit needs it, because surviving isn't enough. You need to live. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. I've got another incredible true story coming next week about the woman who walked across Antarctica alone. You won't want to miss it. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's feeling trapped or stuck, someone who needs a reminder of what the human spirit is capable of. And drop a comment telling me what your Mount Kenya is. What's the impossible thing you want to do just to feel alive? I want to hear your stories. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.